you very much for the warm introduction. How's my audio? Hopefully my audio is fine. Excellent, excellent. So number one, I'm very much honored to be presenting here, amongst these legendary researchers, after Antonio and Domenico, and right before Chris. So thanks so much for this opportunity. So like Domenico, I'd actually like to start by acknowledging all the folks who actually did the research that I'm about to present. And in particular, I want to really acknowledge Tess Hellebreakers and Jessica Yin, two researchers who I'm going to be presenting quite a bit of their work. And also a lot of this was done in collaboration with Oliver Cromer, who's a professor here at CMU in the Robotics Institute. So, as you heard in the introduction, I mean, my approach to robotics really focuses more on the materials and mechanics, and in particular, this notion of soft matter engineering. So can we engineer machines and robotic hardware with materials that are orders of magnitude softer than the types of stiff materials that you typically see in more conventional robotics. And so our focus is on using soft rubbers, elastomers, gels, and fluids to create effectively artificial muscle, artificial skin, and artificial nervous tissue in these next generation robotic systems. So, of course, a lot of you are familiar with the field of soft robotics, where there's a lot of potentially unique advantages to using soft materials engineering to perform robotic tasks. I mean, here's just a few examples of some recent soft robot implementations from my group. Now, all these videos, what you notice is that these systems are untethered, and the way that we can kind of build these more compact soft robotic systems is that we use shape memory alloy as the artificial muscle. And so throughout this presentation, anywhere you see anything kind of move, for the most part, those robotic implementations are performed using wires of shape memory alloy that we power just using a battery or power just using electrical current. Other areas where soft matter engineering has potential impact is haptics. And so this is also an area where we see tremendous potential for using not just soft actuators, but also soft sensor technologies and other types of multifunctional materials that we can incorporate into devices that physically interact with humans or could also be wearable on the body. And then kind of along those lines of kind of wearable computing, wearable electronics, of course, is energy harvesting. So going beyond just having LiPo batteries, looking at ways to harvest energy from the environment or from the body. And of course, the most, I would say, mature field within soft materials engineering, which is in this domain of soft electronic architectures and these kind of sticker-like circuits that we can put on skin, put on the body, and use for all sorts of applications, from physiological monitoring to and what I'm going to present here, providing basically the sense of touch to soft robotic systems. Okay, so I'm just going to go through just a few examples of how we use some of these architectures in applications and robot grasping and manipulation. I want to start with a fairly mature technology that's been made famous by researchers like Stephanie LaCour and John Rogers and George Whitesides, Takeo Sumeya. I mean, these are architectures largely based on these ultra thin film electronics and also metallic interconnects where you achieve stretchiness through these kind of wavy or serpentine architectures. So here's this kind of some of the more basic deterministic architectures that we've developed in my group. And really what's special here is not so much the material architecture. I mean, that's been made famous by other legendary researchers. I mean, really our contribution here is to introduce new design CAD tools, and also rapid prototyping techniques so that you could go from design to fabrication to full implementation in under an hour. So I'll just skip ahead in this video here, but these are quite robust electronics. You can stretch them quite a bit to be on 50% strain, and they can be engineered with all sorts of different sensing modalities depending on what microelectronic chips you populate onto these circuits. However, what we've discovered is that for a lot of applications in wearables and also robotics, including robot grasping, you don't even need the serpentine stretchable component. I mean, it's enough to be flexible. And so we saw this recently with the collaboration with roboticists at the Johnson Space Center, where we've augmented their RoboNaut 2 humanoid robot. So this is a humanoid similar to what they have on the International Space Station. We're just applying simple flex circuits on the fingertips of the RoboNaut was enough to kind of augment it and give it this kind of not just tactile sensing functionality, but also this kind of superhuman sensing. So later, Chris is going to be talking about all the exciting kind of opportunities within that space of kind of going beyond, above and beyond what humans are capable. In this case, putting time of flight sensors. So now RoboNaut can hover its hand or fingers over objects and do scans and reconstructions. Also incorporating pulse oximetry chips so it can measure, say, a person's heart rate or blood oxygenation. Here's another example of what we can do with flex circuitry to kind of augment the functionality of soft robotic systems. So this is actually a pneumatically powered soft robot, but what you're actually seeing here is a fairly complex architecture of not just kind of a pneumatic actuator, but also flex circuitry that's covered in these microfluidic cells of genetically programmed bacteria. These are E. coli cells that we've programmed in collaboration with some synthetic biologists such that when these bacteria get exposed to certain types of chemicals, they start to create protein that fluoresce. And so by putting basically electronics for fluorescence microscopy inside of the flex circuitry embedded within the gripper, we can continuously monitor all of these genetically modified bacteria that are basically coated on the interior of the soft robot fingers. And so in this way, we go from chemical signals to this biological response to this the creation of these fluorescent proteins to kind of an optical signal that we then, with our onboard electronics, convert to electrical signal that feeds back to the controller of the robot, then commands that very same robot gripper to go perform pick and place tasks. And so here's an example of a gripper that and I'll just play the video here for you, that will basically dip into a pool, determine whether there is a certain amount of chemical content, and depending on that chemical concentration, it will decide whether to safely deploy this object. And so I'm just going to kind of skip through here. At the end, when it's kind of deemed that this water bath is safe, then it knows to safely deploy this object. And so, in of itself, maybe not something of practical use in its current form at least, but I think a nice kind of demonstration of how you can combine flex circuit technologies along with soft robotics and synthetic biology to achieve this multimodal sensing within a very simple kind of soft robot gripper design. Okay, so moving on to kind of other material architectures that we work with. So, if we do want sensing skins that are much more flexible and stretchable, we can use liquid metal architectures. And so here's an example of a liquid metal based skin. So all the circuitry you see here are basically microfluidic channels of a metal that's liquid at room temperature, and so that's why it's able to bend and stretch and deform with the surrounding rubber. And also what you see here is the circuitry embedded with all sorts of different sensing chips, so we can have this multimodal sensing capability within the skin. Because it's soft and stretchable, we can kind of wrap it around this soft robot gripper. Again, we're using shape memory alloy here for the actuation, and because of this. Because the sensing is multimodal, we can basically incorporate all sorts of forms of feedback when we perform gripping tasks with this soft robot end effector. So here we use a time of flight sensor for a scan and determine the location of an object. We have these liquid metal pressure sensors in here that actually detect whether contact has successfully been achieved. And then we also have here an IMU to track the motion of the gripper. And what's significant about having all these sensors on board is that we can do this feedback control and make this gripper very robust to any kind of disturbances. So I'll kind of skip ahead in this video here just in the interest of time. But for example, if you scan the object, locate it, but then suddenly move it, that's something that the gripper can kind of pick up on its own and then reattempt the grasp accordingly. And then likewise, if we say, pull the object away as it's performing the gripping task. Again, that's something that the onboard sensors can detect. And so this is kind of one way of starting to incorporate some degree of autonomy into these soft robotic systems. Okay, so just one more demonstration of using a liquid metal. This is done in collaboration with Oliver Cromer's group, where we've been able to demonstrate the ability to kind of, to a certain degree of accuracy, determine successful closed grip and also lift. And again, what I want to emphasize here is that for the most part, these electronics and sensing and actuation capabilities, this is all achieved using these kind of soft liquid metal based sensing skins. Okay, so what I really want to focus on for this presentation is work on using functionalized elastomer composites in which we've basically endowed the rubber with tactile sensing properties by using functional powders and fillers. So these could be nano or micro particle materials. So we've done quite a bit of work and done numerous collaborations with groups looking at carbon-filled or silver-filled conductive elastomers and using these for different types of tactile interfaces or haptic interfaces or tracking body motion. What I want to focus on is kind of a more recent development from my group, and I need to credit here Tess Hellerbrekers, who recently graduated from my lab, and this work again was in collaboration with Oliver Cromer, looking at this novel material architecture where we create this effectively this soft magnetic tactile skin. So just like Domenico presented, basically some of the advantages of using magnetics and kind of magnetic constraints and magnetic funneling to do proximity detection and kind of localization for improved control of soft robot grippers. What we found is that a lot of these ferromagnetic and magnetized materials can also be used for measuring contact and pressure. And so the principle here is actually quite straightforward. We have a soft silicone rubber. We've embedded it with these magnetized microparticles. Nominally, they're all kind of aligned in terms of their magnetic field. And then we can track changes in the magnetic field using an embedded magnetometer. So this is a 3-axis magnetometer that's wired up using liquid metal circuitry. And the reason we use liquid metal electronics here is so that basically the circuitry can kind of stretch and deform with the silicone rubber skin. As you press down in different locations, those magnetic particles, they displace, they change orientation, and that induces changes in internal magnetic field that we pick up using this magnetometer. So in this way, we can use this kind of constantly changing internal magnetic field to detect things about surface tractions on this skin. And why it's significant is we can do continuous sensing over this kind of finite area here, all using just a single sensing chip. So rather than having to have a dedicated sensing chip for every single node at which we want to detect contact, here we just have a single chip, and then we can detect both the location and intensity of pressure over this continuous area. And just because of the stochastic nature of this coupling or this mapping from pressure to magnetic field, we have to use various classifiers and regression schemes, with machine learning. So that's really where Oliver Cromer's expertise came in. And so what we found is that after we train a classifier, in this case we use the quadratic discriminant analysis, we were able to create these continuous tactile skins for all sorts of different applications here. And so this is just I'll just play a video here just showing just kind of a simple implementation of a little kind of game controller. Again, all this done with just a single magnetometer sensing chip. Now, how this relates to tactile sensing and soft robot grippers and manipulation, that really is the focus kind of our ongoing work here. So here's this one example of putting the magnetic skin not on the fingertips of the robot, but instead on an object that we want to interact with. So this does really kind of resemble a lot of what Domenico was showing you earlier, but here we're using these soft sensing skins that can be used not just for this magnetic funneling that Domenico was showing, but we can also have this double as a pressure sensor. So once when contact is made, and as the robot gripper kind of further squeezes on the skin, that will cause the magnetic particles to displace, and that pressure control displacement is going to be detected by magnetometers that are embedded in the tips of that gripper. And so that's what you're seeing here in this video, and I'll just let this play. So first, we just synthesize these composites by just adding magnetic particles to the rubber. We mix it up, and then we permanently magnetize, and then attach it to, say in this case, a key. And then we use that magnetic funneling to kind of locate the key. And then when we want to, say, perform a task like, opening this lock, and we want to do, locate the lock and also kind of modulate the pressure, we use that tactile sensing property. Here, you're seeing an example of using both the tactile sensing and that proximity detection here to do this kind of multimodal type of manipulation, where we detect the object, grip it, and then we are able to kind of modulate the pressure on it to get different amounts of volumes of liquid to come out of the pipette. And so I'll just kind of play that video again, just so you can kind of see how we're going to be able to do that in real time. So this is still very much ongoing work. We're now collaborating with Avana Gupta at Facebook AI, and looking at a range of other applications of these magnetic tactile sensing skins, and kind of looking at it not just for kind of robot gripping, but also kind of putting it into wearables like this glove or this kind of armband, or even kind of little pressure sensing socks here. So something we're very much kind of excited to continue pursuing. So that's it. This is a fairly quick talk. I kind of prepared just to kind of leave room here for questions and answers. But yeah, again, I just want to acknowledge members of my lab, the Soft Machines group, and then also test hellebreakers, especially, and Oliver Cromer have kind of contributed a lot of what I presented here. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation, very interesting. Is there any question here?
Hi, Carmel. Good to see you again.
Hey.
Yep. From Singapore. Yeah, cool. Very nice talk. Always very inspired by your work. I have a question about the magnetic-based material. In terms of the speed, could you share a bit about how fast you typically get the response through the classification, and also if there's do you see ways you can increase the number of tactile inputs simultaneously, or is mostly limited by the number of chips you use?
Right. So regarding speed, so once when the classifier is trained, I mean the mapping is done very quickly. So the limiting factor is actually more just on the internal mechanics and kind of physics and viscoelasticity of the material. And you can kind of get a sense here. I mean, I'll have to kind of dig through papers to find plots that better quantify the response speeds. And unfortunately, this actually doesn't have, I just noticed it doesn't have axes in terms of seconds. So the response times are quite good, on the order of like maybe say hundreds of milliseconds is kind of what I would expect. And again, that's going to be limited basically by the kind of the viscoelasticity of the material, just because when you press down, it takes just a little bit of time for that stress, that internal traction to basically translate into mechanical deformation and displacement of those magnetic particles. The rest, kind of relatively speaking, happens fairly quickly, kind of more on the order of milliseconds. Regarding how we can say improve the resolution or kind of the coverage of these. Yes, I mean, we have been exploring, more powerful magnetometer chips, but also just having more numerous chips as well. So kind of a lot of the work we've been doing kind of more recently looks at having kind of an array of these chips. We can still achieve this kind of continuous sensing over a large area. So, we can have you can discretize your surface into, any arbitrary number, hundreds or thousands or, tens of thousands of nodes, and then, basically track kind of the location and pressure using just kind of a handful of magnetometer chips that are distributed throughout.
Great, thank you. Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Thank you. There is one more question. Lucas, please ask your question.
Yeah, first, thanks for the really nice talk. I always wonder what is the lifetime on the robustness of those elastic circuits. So I wonder if you maybe have some information on that already.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, that's a very good question, and that is actually a very big concern, especially with our collaborators at Facebook, right? Because I mean, the whole point is that we want to kind of see this being used in everyday life and commercial products, and there's not. Whereas in the lab, I mean, we're fine with doing a one-off test or doing it for the course of the week and declaring victory. In practice, you want these to kind of last for months or in some cases maybe even years. We haven't systematically looked at the kind of robustness of these. With other material systems, we've created, say, using the liquid metal architectures. There, we've demonstrated millions, 2 million loading cycles. So more than enough for kind of a lot of practical applications. But in the specific case of these magnetic tactile sensors, we have yet to do those kind of high durability and fatigue tests. I will say that a big factor is the choice of elastomer, right? So we've kind of used silicones just because they are a little bit more kind of robust and durable, and you see them in a lot of more high grade consumer products, and so basically that represents the limiting factor. So I would say that that's kind of where we would start in terms of ways that we would address that if that is an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I will say kind of in passing, I mean, sometimes we do also, with his magnetic skins, we haven't seen it as much, but there's always that possibility of drift over time in terms of the actual coupling. And so those classifiers and, kind of machine learning algorithms do have to account for the fact that, over weeks or months, there might have to be kind of updates to those classifiers to account for any kind of changes in the kind of the internal mechanical properties or physics coupling of these materials.
Great. Thank you very much, Carmel. I think we don't have too much time. Vincent, I think we have to move to another